Imagine living in the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen. A civilization stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. A superpower governing tens of millions of people. Now imagine something else. There are no newspapers, no radios, no television, no internet. And yet, somehow, everyone still hears the news. Laws are announced. Elections are organized, criminals are sentenced, auctions are held, gladiatorial games are promoted. Information moves through the city faster than you might expect. So here's the question that unlocks a fascinating secret about the Roman world. Who told the people of Rome what was happening? Who controlled the flow of information in the most powerful civilization of antiquity? The answer is surprisingly human. They were not senators, not generals, not emperors. They were voices, powerful voices. They were the Praecones, the official public criers of ancient Rome. And by the end of this story, you will understand how these forgotten figures became the human loudspeakers of the Roman state, and why their role reveals something profound about how information, authority, and power worked in the ancient world. To understand the importance of the Praecones, we must step into the streets of Rome during the height of the Republic and later the Roman Empire. The city itself was enormous by ancient standards. At its peak, Rome may have held close to 1 million inhabitants, an astonishing number for the ancient world. Crowded markets filled the air with noise, merchants shouted prices, politicians gathered supporters, citizens debated news and rumors. The Roman Forum stood at the heart of this vibrant chaos, functioning as the political, legal, economic, and social center of Roman life. It was here that the machinery of the Republic operated in full public view.
But the Roman world faced a challenge that modern societies rarely think about: communication. Literacy existed, but it was far from universal. Many citizens could not read complex legal texts or official decrees posted on walls. Even those who could read often learned important news through public announcements rather than written documents. In a world without mass media, the spoken word carried enormous power. Information had to be heard to exist. This is where the Praecones entered Roman history. The Latin word Praecones roughly translates to public crier or announcer, but the true importance of these men went far beyond simply shouting messages. They were trained professionals whose voices carried the authority of the Roman state. They worked for magistrates, courts, and public officials. Their job was to deliver announcements clearly, loudly, and accurately to large crowds. In a sense, they were the broadcast system of the ancient world. Historians such as Mary Beard often emphasize that Roman public life was intensely theatrical. Politics happened in front of crowds. Laws were debated publicly. Trials were dramatic spectacles attended by large audiences. Authority had to be seen and heard. In this environment, controlling the voice that delivered information meant controlling how people understood events. The Praecones performed many different roles throughout Roman society. One of their most important duties involved the legal system. Roman courts were frequently held in open spaces where large groups could observe proceedings. Before a trial began, it was the Praecones who called the court to order. He demanded silence from the crowd. He summoned witnesses. And when a verdict was reached, it was often the Praecones who proclaimed the decision so that everyone present could hear the judgment of Roman law. But their responsibilities did not stop at the courthouse. The Roman economy depended heavily on auctions, and auctions required order, speed, and clarity. When estates were sold, when confiscated property changed hands, or when goods arrived from distant provinces, a Praecones often managed the bidding process. Anyone who has ever watched a modern auctioneer will immediately recognize the rhythm of this ancient profession. Rapid speech, strong projection, and the ability to command attention were essential skills. In fact, many scholars, including Adrian Goldsworthy, have noted that Roman society relied heavily on public performance. Speeches, announcements, and ceremonies were central to political culture. A magistrate could issue a decree, but unless the people heard it, its authority remained incomplete. And that is precisely what the Praecones provided, the audible presence of Roman power.
Their influence was especially visible during elections. Political campaigns in the Roman Republic were energetic, noisy, and intensely competitive. Candidates relied on visibility and recognition. Supporters gathered in public spaces to promote their preferred candidates. In this environment, a praecone could help attract attention, announce meetings, and amplify the message of powerful political figures. In many ways, these men served as the earliest version of public broadcasters. The praecones also played a role in the entertainment culture that Romans loved so much. Before gladiatorial games began, before crowds filled amphitheaters and arenas, announcements had to be made, schedules had to be declared, participants had to be introduced. The voice that carried those announcements across the crowd was often that of a praecone. Their words built anticipation and excitement before the spectacle began. All of this reveals something important about Roman society. The Roman state did not rely solely on written documents to maintain authority. Instead, it relied on public rituals, visible ceremonies, and spoken announcements. Information had to travel through crowds. It had to echo through markets, courts, and forums. And the men responsible for carrying that information were the praecones. Modern historians, such as Greg Wolfe and Peter Garnsey, have pointed out that large empires require systems of communication in order to function. Armies may conquer territory, but information holds it together. Without reliable ways to announce laws, organize commerce, and communicate decisions, even the most powerful government begins to fragment. In Rome, the praecones were part of that invisible communication network. Their voices carried official announcements into the daily lives of ordinary citizens. They transformed written authority into audible reality. They turned government decisions into public knowledge. And perhaps most importantly, they made power visible, or rather, audible. Yet the story does not end there. As Roman society evolved, new methods of sharing information slowly appeared. One of the most fascinating examples was the Acta Diurna, sometimes described as the earliest form of a public news bulletin. These daily records were displayed in public places and reported political events, legal decisions, and social news. Some historians even describe them as a distant ancestor of the modern newspaper. But even with these written bulletins, the human voice never lost its influence. In crowded urban spaces where many people gathered daily, spoken announcements remained one of the fastest ways to spread information. In other words, Rome's information system combined written records with human broadcasters, and the praecones were the heart of that system. Their existence reminds us that communication technology did not begin with printing presses or radio waves. Long before modern media existed, societies already understood something essential. Whoever controls the flow of information shapes how people understand reality. The Roman Empire mastered this principle thousands of years ago, and the voices of the praecones were one of its most powerful tools. But this raises an intriguing question. If these men carried the official voice of Rome, what happened when that voice was manipulated? What happened when political leaders used announcements not simply to inform the public, but to influence it? Because in the later Roman world, the control of information would become a powerful political weapon, a tool used by emperors to shape public opinion across the empire. Sometimes the most powerful forces in history aren't armies or emperors. Sometimes they're just a voice rising above the crowd. And that is a story worth exploring, don't you think? So if you enjoyed discovering the hidden communication system of ancient Rome, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications so you never miss our next deep exploration of Roman history. Share this video with anyone fascinated by the ancient world. And tell me in the comments, if you lived in ancient Rome, would you trust the voice of the Praeco, or would you question the message he was sent to deliver? See you next video.